So it's awesome that we've been able to optimize this for the forced re-render case, but there's another case where things are updating that we don't actually want them to, and that is if I hit profile and then click on one of these buttons and then stop profiling, I'm getting an update of my grid even though it's been memoized. So what's going on here? That's very strange. We're memoizing our value, we're memoizing the grid. So what in the world is going on? Well, what's actually going on here is our state is updating. When I click on one of those, that triggers an update of my grid. And so therefore, this use memo says, oh, okay, that state updated. Let me give you a new array that has that new version of state with the dispatch. We'll pass that along to the value. And React says, oh, great, the value changed. So therefore, I will call all the consumers, which in our case, that's that React use context here, which is being consumed by the grid. So that's why the grid is re-rendering. But we don't need it to re-render. There's no actual changes going on here. The only place that actually needs to re-render is the cell because that's the only place we're actually consuming that state. We're also consuming it here in the dog name input as well. So we don't need this grid to update because that dispatch value never changes. And so what if we could split up the state and the dispatch values into two different contexts? So therefore the grid will never need to re-render because a context change, because that dispatch value never changes, it's stable. And then our cells can go ahead and update when the state changes. So let's go ahead and make that magic happen. We'll have an app dispatch context with React create context. And then let's see, we're going to need to render that within the app provider. I don't want to make a separate provider. There's no sense in doing that. So we're going to say app dispatch context.provider, and then we'll put the children inside of there. It really doesn't make a difference what order you put these in. It's fine either way. And we'll say the value for this is going to be our dispatch. And then the value for our state context provider is going to just be the state. So now we no longer need to memoize anything. We just get rid of that completely. And now our app provider is rendering two contexts here. And then we just need to make a use app dispatch. Okay. And then this is going to be our app dispatch context. And here we'll fix that error message to be a little more useful. And then here we can say, hey, I don't need that state. I just need the dispatch. So we'll just grab that dispatch for our grid. And then down here, we're going to say, hey, I've got state and dispatch coming from that app, from that use app state. But now use app state is only returning the state. So we'll say state. And then we'll have our dispatch come from use app dispatch. And then we'll do a very similar thing here where we say dispatch is use app dispatch, and then we get our state from here. Now, of course, you could make a use app dispatch. Now, of course, if this bothers you that you have to use two hooks for this, then you could actually really easily make a use app state and dispatch hook, which would simply say use app state and use app dispatch. And now you can do both in one, but I'm not going to bother with that. But I just love the fact that we can do that with hooks. So nice and simple. So with that change now, let's see if we can prevent that grid from re-rendering because the state changed, because it doesn't care about state changes. It just cares about that dispatch function. So with all of our changes, we're going to start a profile. We'll click on one of these. We'll stop the profile and boom, we've got the grid no longer re-rendering, which is exactly what we were looking for. So let's go ahead and take a look at the production deploy for this extra credit and compare it to the production deploy for our final version that we had before we made these changes. So this is the final version of the exercise, and then this is the final version for the extra credit. And if I start before we made these changes, I click on one of these and then I stop. And then we'll do the same thing over here. I start, I click on one of these and then I stop. And boom, we've got this click right here that's happening. Wow, that's taking quite a bit of time, that 402 milliseconds. And then on this side, we've got 442. So it really isn't a huge change. We are on a 6x slowdown, so it should be a lot faster for most users. But this really is a pretty slow grid, and we have some additional optimizations that we want to make to this. But we did make a small improvement here, so I'm going to go ahead and keep this optimization, and then we can continue to optimize this grid further. In review, what we did to make this optimization happen is we came up here and we said, hey, we are providing a state and a dispatch, And not all of our components need both of those things. So let's go ahead and split these up into two distinct providers. So we created a provider for our dispatch in addition to the provider for our state. And then we rendered both of those, one taking the state as a value, the other taking the dispatch as the value. We created a special hook for consuming the dispatch. And then anywhere where we needed the dispatch, we got it from that special hook. Anywhere where we needed the state and the dispatch, we just used both of them. And now components that are only consuming the dispatch don't need to pay the penalty for when our state is updated.